I agree that science, especially physics, has historically made successive efforts to overcome various cognitive biases due to our subjective constitution. I also agree that to make progress in the future, we must expect physics to continue to make that effort. Many other scientists, especially physicists and philosophers, would agree with this.
The physical constants, things like the speed of light, gravitational constant, and strong and weak force and things, physicists agree, most physicists agree, that if you change any of those constants by even a very, very small amount, then we don't come into existence. The universe doesn't come into existence. They have to be like that in order for galaxies to form, for stars to form, for chemistry to form, actually. And then for the prerequisite for life to evolve needs that as well. So that's the nearest approach to a good argument. Either you're going to stick with a fine-tuning argument, which is a good argument, or you've got to produce a really good argument for Jesus. But don't think that because you've convinced somebody by the fine-tuning argument to be a deist, that therefore he's then got to believe in Jesus.
I am now convinced of the opposite thesis. That is, that far from being evidence in favor of exotic theories, these coincidences should rather be considered as confirming conventional physics and cosmology, which could in principle have been used to predict them all in advance of their observation. However, these predictions do require the use of what may be termed the Anthropic principle, to the effect that what we can expect to observe must be restricted by the conditions necessary for our presence as observers. One of the most thought-provoking conundrums in modern cosmology goes by the name of the Anthropic principle. This states that however you look at it, our universe appears to be very finely tuned to maximize the chances for biological life like us. There are currently 25 fundamental dimensionless constants required for the standard model of physics, and the ratios between them govern the fundamental interactions of physics, and also the size, age, and expansion of the universe. Here's the big question. How did the universe spring into being so perfectly tuned for life like this? An anthropologist from the University of Kansas can make observations about stone spheres in Costa Rica and justifiably conclude the people who made them didn't leave any written records. We're left to archaeological data to try to reconstruct the context. The culture of the people who made them became extinct shortly after the Spanish conquest. So, there are no myths or legends or other stories that are told by the indigenous people of Costa Rica about why they made these spheres. Indigenous people made these stone spheres. None of the anthropologists directly observed the people making the stone spheres. There are no extant records of people making the stone spheres. But water erosion and wind erosion don't make smooth spheres. A person makes smooth spheres. There are some spheres that have been found that still have the marks of the blows on them from hammered stones. We think that that's how they were formed, by hammering on big rocks and sculpting them into a spherical shape. Physicists make observations about the cosmos and concluded that the fundamental forces of nature did not determine the values of these dimensionless physical constants. That's a property of a person. A person determines things. A person determines those values. This person must transcend the physical universe and determine the conditions necessary for us to live. This does not scientifically prove that God exists. This is evidence that God exists. That's why Richard Dawkins said that the fine-tuning argument is a good argument for God's existence.
And so the goal of physics, we believe, is to find an equation, perhaps no more than 1 inch long, which will allow us to unify all the forces of nature and allow us to read the mind of God.
The basic motivation is just to learn how nature works. What's really going on? Einstein said it very nicely. He's not interested in this detailed question or that detailed question. He just wanted to know what were God's thoughts when he created the world.
Well, let's assume that it is only one universe, and we were all convinced of that. How then possibly could you get this fine-tuning? Some would suggest that indicates some sort of a plan, a teleology, an end seeking, whether it's some sort of a mind or God in one hand, or even a universe that's somehow self-conscious and self-creating. I mean, there are a lot of theories out there.
Yes, and those, of course, are not yet scientific theories, but they are speculations, and I don't find anything wrong with that. Just don't call them science. And no, I do a bit of that myself. And I think that there is probably a mental component of the universe, and you can call it God if you like. But if that is so, then there's no reason why that this mental component shouldn't have had a hand in setting the conditions.
It is quite intuitive to understand that the universe is the product of a mind. It makes sense that there's a mind about how the universe works, bringing order to nature's mechanisms.